The gala hall sparkled under crystal chandeliers, the kind of place where wealth flaunts itself with every polished surface and meticulously curated smile. Guests moved like pieces on a chessboard, each aware of the subtle hierarchies that governed the night, each ready to assert their superiority with the slightest tilt of a head or the faintest curl of a lip. Among them stood Alexandria Hale, a woman whose silver hair was sculpted with perfection and whose designer gown whispered of centuries-old prestige. Her eyes, sharp and unforgiving, scanned the crowd with the familiar entitlement of someone born into power. She spotted her target almost immediately, a striking black woman in an elegant dark emerald dress that shimmered with understated luxury, a figure who seemed almost too real to belong in this curated world. "Clumsy," Alexandria barked, her voice slicing through the soft classical music like a whip. "This is exactly why your kind doesn't belong here." Her words were venomous, practiced, meant to humiliate. The room froze for a fraction of a second, and then erupted into cruel, delighted laughter. Phones were raised, capturing every frame, every hiss of disdain, the kind of digital evidence that promised fleeting social media notoriety. Alexandra advanced, her heels clicking like a warning drumbeat on the marble floor. "You hear me? Nothing. You don't deserve to breathe the same air as decent people here. Security, remove this disaster before she ruins something valuable." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot, and a team of flustered guards approached, unsure if the command was literal or figurative. The woman in the emerald dress, Simone Aldridge, stood her ground, her jaw tight but composed, her eyes unflinching. She had learned over years of adversity that the world often underestimated her and that the very people who sought to humiliate her were ignorant of the power they toyed with. One of the guards shoved her toward the floor, and she fell with a soft thud, wine spilling over her gown and glinting like rubies in the chandelier light. The room's laughter swelled, a chorus of self-satisfied superiority, until Simone began to rise. Each movement was deliberate, a slow reclaiming of dignity, her hand gripping the edge of her dress, her other hand clutching her phone as if it were a weapon forged of patience and quiet fury. The air seemed to shift, the laughter faltering, replaced by a tense hush that vibrated through the grand hall. Alexandra leaned in, lowering her voice to a hiss that carried further than she imagined. "You're wretched, worthless. You will never be anything more than this pathetic mess on the floor." Her words were meant to wound, to puncture the aura of confidence that Simone had carried despite every challenge. But Simone stood fully upright now, her eyes sweeping the room. The laughter died, the phones lowered slightly, curiosity mingling with unease. Because what they didn't know, what no one in this ostentatious hall could fathom, was that the woman on the floor was not just any guest. She was a storm disguised in a gown, a hurricane that could dismantle empires. Simone Aldridge, at 45, was one of the most formidable business minds in America, her net worth exceeding $57 billion, her influence spanning continents. Richardson Global Industries, her creation, was a testament to her intellect, vision, and relentless determination, a conglomerate with stakes in real estate, technology, manufacturing, and even emerging markets no one else dared touch. She had built it all from the ground up, each triumph forged in the crucible of struggle, guided by the sacrifices of her grandmother who had given everything for Simone to stand here today. And yet, despite her wealth, her power, the empire she commanded, she had never let it make her cruel. Respect, she knew, was the currency that truly mattered. The Whitmores, on the other hand, were a family whose wealth was a veneer, a fragile facade hiding years of mismanagement and secret bankruptcy. Charles Whitmore, 62, had inherited the empire that once defined Manhattan's skyline, but time, greed, and hubris had eroded it into a hollow shell. His wife, Vanessa, still held herself as though she were queen of a realm long lost, while their children, beautiful, entitled, and reckless, flitted around the gala, blissfully ignorant of the precarious state of their dynasty. Simone's rise had been about resilience, the Whitmores' collapse had been about arrogance. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and for a moment, the room held its collective breath with her. With a swipe, she turned her phone on, activating its camera, and began speaking, not to the guests, not to the family that had humiliated her, but to the world. Each word she uttered was measured, controlled, but laced with a power that could not be ignored. "I want to show everyone here what happens when entitlement meets reality," she said, her voice calm but commanding, resonating through the hall and directly into the minds of every witness. As the live stream went public, phones around the room began to capture her face, her poise, her undeniable authority. Alexandra's confident sneer faltered for the first time, the color draining from her face as she realized that the laughter, the humiliation, had shifted. Simone's words were like the first note of a symphony of reckoning. She began recounting the Whitmores' secrets, revealing investments gone wrong, offshore accounts, liens on properties no one thought were encumbered, and the truth behind the gilded facade, bankruptcy. Shock rippled through the room as murmurs replaced laughter. The children of the family stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend the scope of Simone's revelations, while Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth, a futile attempt to stifle the panic rising inside her. Charles Whitmore himself turned pale, the empire he had spent decades building dissolving in the glare of public scrutiny and Simone's impeccable narrative. But Simone wasn't done. She had come to reclaim not just her dignity but to teach a lesson in humility and consequence. She outlined the steps Richardson Global Industries would take to acquire the Whitmore holdings, step by step, legal intricacies, financial leverage, and inevitable outcomes, leaving no room for misinterpretation. By the end of her monologue, the room had transformed from a playground of elitist mockery into a theater of awe and fear. This wasn't mere vengeance, it was justice delivered with precision and intellect. The guests whispered, cameras clicked, and the Whitmores understood, perhaps for the first time in their lives, that power without competence was nothing, and arrogance without awareness was a liability. Simone straightened her dress, now dry in some places but still bearing the marks of the wine, a visual testament to what she had endured and what she had overcome. She smiled faintly, not at the family, not at the stunned crowd, but at the sheer poetry of her triumph. "This," she said softly, almost to herself, "is what respect looks like." She turned and walked toward the exit, her presence a declaration that the night had changed irreversibly. Behind her, the Whitmores and their guests were left to face the truth, exposed and humiliated, their secrets laid bare before the very audience they had underestimated. And as Simone disappeared into the night, cameras still rolling, the world outside watched in awe. Social media erupted with the story, hashtags trending globally, financial analysts recalculating the future of the Whitmore holdings, and every aspiring entrepreneur who had ever doubted themselves finding inspiration in her composure and intellect. By the time the gala was over, Simone Aldridge had done more than reclaim her dignity. She had rewritten the narrative of power, influence, and justice in the modern world. The Whitmores would remember the night not as a gala, but as a lesson, paid for in full with the currency they truly valued: reputation, respect, and the illusion of control. And Simone, as always, moved forward, undeterred, unbroken, a force of nature in heels, a reminder that no amount of wealth, privilege, or disdain could ever stand against determination, intelligence, and the quiet strength of someone who truly knew their worth. The gala, once a stage for arrogance and cruelty, had become a testament to resilience, a narrative for the ages, and the Whitmores, along with the guests who had mocked her, had been schooled in the most expensive, unforgettable way possible. And as the world watched, shared, and marveled, one truth became undeniable: underestimating Simone Aldridge was a mistake no one would ever make again. The night was crisp, the kind of October evening in Manhattan that made every skyscraper sparkle like a jewel against the dark sky, and the Hale penthouse loomed at the top of Fifth Avenue like a citadel of old money pride. Inside, the air was thick with perfume, polished leather, and the faint hint of expensive champagne, a concoction designed to impress, intimidate, and maintain the illusion of superiority. Among the glittering crowd, Cecilia Hale reigned with an invisible scepter, her silver-streaked hair coiled into a perfect chignon, her gown an austere declaration of wealth, influence, and social mastery. Every movement she made was measured, each word she uttered a calculated instrument of power. Tonight, like countless nights before, Cecilia thrived on controlling the hierarchy around her, ensuring that everyone knew exactly who belonged, and who didn't. It wasn't about friendship, compassion, or even networking. It was about maintaining an ecosystem in which she always stood at the apex. Her husband, Victor Hale, 63, was a man whose mind was a labyrinth of secrets, debts, and desperate calculations. To the outside world, he appeared calm, composed, a patriarch of old wealth, a man whose empire of real estate and corporate holdings seemed untouchable. But behind closed doors, he had been juggling crises for months, shuffling money through hidden accounts, securing secret loans, and negotiating deals that teetered on the edge of collapse. Tonight's gala, celebrated as the pinnacle of Whitmore-Hale social synergy, was supposed to be the stage for the most ambitious business maneuver of Victor's life, a $1.2 billion merger with Richardson Global Industries, a deal that would have salvaged the Hale empire, erased hidden debts, and elevated their family to untouchable heights. They had never seen the woman whose signature was critical to their plan. All communication had passed through lawyers, intermediaries, and encrypted emails. In their minds, she was probably an older white man, a faceless executive who would nod politely, sign the papers, and enrich their family forever. The irony of the evening, however, would be far more devastating than any financial miscalculation. As Cecilia glided across the marble floor, scanning the crowd with the practiced air of a predator, her eyes landed on her unsuspecting target. The woman in emerald, Simone Caldwell, moved with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged everywhere she stepped, though in the context of this hall, she was treated as an interloper. "Clumsy," Cecilia hissed, her voice cutting through the polite hum of conversation. "This is exactly why your kind doesn't belong here." The words struck with the precision of a scalpel. Guests paused, holding their drinks, their laughter hovering in a delicate, predatory balance. Within seconds, their mirth erupted, a chorus of cruel delight aimed at humiliating someone they considered beneath notice. Phones came out, capturing every angle, every twitch of discomfort, every look of disdain. Victor's children, Brandon, 29, and Isabella, 27, flank their mother, their expressions a mixture of cruelty and entitlement. Brandon, tall, impossibly handsome, and accustomed to having the world bend to his whims, laughed with a sharp, mocking edge. He had never worked a day in his life, had failed in every business venture his father purchased for him, and now used the suffering of others as a game to reinforce his superiority. Isabella, delicate yet lethal in appearance, smiled sweetly while her eyes glinted with malice. She had learned from Cecilia that humiliation could be an art form, that social cruelty was a tool for maintaining dominance. And she wielded it effortlessly. But Simone did not stumble in fear. She did not shrink, despite the shove from the security team and the rush of wine that splashed across her dress. She was not here as a guest in need of approval, she was here as a force of nature. Slowly, deliberately, she rose, her hand clutching her phone as though it were a sword. The room's laughter began to fade, replaced by a tense, electric stillness, a collective realization that something beyond their comprehension was about to unfold. Cecilia leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried like a blade. "Wretched, worthless, you will never be more than what you are right now." The words were designed to wound, but the effect was the opposite of what she intended. Simone straightened, the wine on her gown now a badge of defiance rather than shame. Her eyes swept the room with icy precision. Every insult, every shove, every laugh was noted, catalogued, and absorbed. For this was no ordinary woman. Simone Caldwell, 46, had forged an empire from nothing. Richardson Global Industries was her brainchild, spanning real estate, technology, manufacturing, and emerging markets worldwide. She was a billionaire, a visionary, a woman who had faced down adversity her entire life and emerged not only unbroken but stronger, sharper, and utterly unyielding. And yet, she carried herself with a calm that spoke of intelligence, not arrogance, power tempered with grace, authority wielded without cruelty. She activated her phone, turning on the camera, and began to speak, not to Cecilia, not to the Hale family, but to the world. "Live. Let's see how quickly arrogance and entitlement crumble in the presence of reality," she said, her voice even, deliberate, and commanding. The hush in the room deepened, whispers replaced laughter, phones lowered, curiosity intermingled with dread. Simone recounted the truth about the Hales, the secret loans, the failing investments, the debts they had hidden behind layers of prestige. Each revelation was surgical, precise, and undeniable. By the time she finished, the guests realized that what they had assumed was invincibility was a fragile illusion. Victor Hale's face had turned pale, Cecilia's composure cracked ever so slightly. Brandon and Isabella froze, the game of superiority slipping from their grasp. Simone had not only reclaimed her dignity, she had flipped the hierarchy entirely. The Hales were now exposed, humiliated, powerless in the glare of her intellect and poise. And the irony was exquisite. The woman they had mocked, the one they had thought beneath them, was the very CEO whose signature could have saved or destroyed their empire. The charity gala, meant to cement a historic business merger, had become a theater of reckoning. Social media erupted. Every word Simone spoke went viral. Analysts dissected the revelations, investors recalculated risks, and the global business community watched in stunned silence. The Hales, meanwhile, were left to confront the consequences of their cruelty and arrogance. The night stretched on, but for Simone, it had been a moment of quiet justice, a demonstration that true power is not inherited, purchased, or flaunted, it is earned, tempered by experience, and defended with intellect and courage. As she walked away, leaving a stunned crowd behind, one truth was undeniable: underestimating Simone Caldwell was a mistake the Hales would pay for, in reputation, in legacy, and in the bitter memory of a night where the tables turned irrevocably. The gala, once a playground for the rich and cruel, had become a testament to resilience, intelligence, and the unassailable power of a woman who knew her worth. And as Simone disappeared into the New York night, leaving the Hales to face the ruin of their pride and the reckoning of their choices, the world watched, inspired, awed, and reminded that no amount of wealth or entitlement could ever surpass true merit and unyielding strength.